order, and we'll start with the Honourable Le Boutillier with an opening statement, and then, am I understanding, Mr. Hoppe, or you also have a statement? So just follow, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, or Mr. Vice Chair, for the opportunity to provide input into the Standing Committee's study of the main estimates. I am joined by Mr. Roch Huppé, the agency's Chief Financial Officer and Assistant Commissioner of the Finance and Administration Branch, as well as Mr. Ted Gallivan, the Assistant Commissioner of the International Large Business and Investigations Branch. First off, I would like to highlight that the agency is seeking $4.2 billion through these main estimates. $3.2 billion requires approval by Parliament. This number represents a 1.9% increase from last year's main estimates. The agency will use these funds to successfully continue its important work. In November, when I last spoke to this committee, I gave an overview of the Canada Revenue Agency's efforts to combat aggressive tax planning and tax avoidance, as well as how the agency is improving services for Canadians. I would like to take a few minutes, Mr. Chair, to update the committee on these two fronts and the ways they are being addressed by the agency. As you know, the agency is increasingly client-focused and exists to serve Canadians and meet their needs. As it says in my mandate letter, my overarching goal as Minister of National Revenue is to ensure that the agency is fairer and more helpful, and that its services are easier to use. The agency is currently overhauling its service model so that people who interact with them feel like valued clients and not just taxpayers. The agency is committed to ensuring that Canadians have access to the information they need about taxes and benefits. It does so through its website, through its call centers, and through written correspondence. Since my last appearance before the committee, the agency has responded to the public's needs by making it easier to get help over the phone, by adding resources to its telephone service. To make sure that Canadians understand the information they receive from the agency, we have simplified the language in 75% of the correspondence it sends to Canadians, making it both easier to read and to understand. The agency is ramping up its outreach efforts to ensure that taxpayers understand and meet their tax obligations. These efforts improve tax compliance through an approach based on getting it right from the start. This educates, informs, and supports taxpayers by improving service and encouraging voluntary compliance. As I'm sure you're aware, we have just completed the 2007 filing season. Over 22.8 million T1 returns were received between February 20th and April 30th, 2017. Nearly 90% of returns were filed electronically. About 58% of those returns were filed by tax preparers through e-file, and 32% were filed by individuals through NetFile. New services were launched to support individuals and tax preparers and help them submit their returns electronically for the 2017 tax filing season. The autofill service automatically fills in parts of tax returns, which makes filing online easier. For this year's tax season, additional slips and prior year returns are available for autofill. Tax preparers can also amend their clients' returns electronically by using the new Refile service. I'm pleased to tell this committee that our service improvements that benefit all Canadians will not stop there. The agency is developing a new service which will fully prepare returns for Canadians by February 2018. This is intended for Canadians with simple tax situations, low or fixed income, and whose financial situations are unchanged from year to year. Furthermore, in order to meet our commitment to provide the best possible service to Canadians from coast to coast, the agency's service renewal plans are well underway. With more Canadians than ever filing their taxes online, the resources needed for the agency to deal with paper returns are decreasing. That is why we are reviewing and reorganizing workloads in order to work smarter and to work more efficiently. In other words, we are improving our call centers and creating national verification and collection centers. These changes mean that the Canada Revenue Agency will be a more efficient organization that will provide better service to Canadians. Still, we always strive to do better by putting Canadians at the heart of our concerns. As the Prime Minister said, we can always do better. Since my appointment as Minister of National Revenue, I have been committed to ensuring that Canadians get the benefits to which they are entitled. That is why the agency is proactively contacting Canadians who are not receiving the tax credits or benefits they should. This is to make sure that the government is supporting the most vulnerable and making sure that Canadian families have the support they need. The agency is also expanding the Community Volunteer Income Tax Program. That way, more Canadians than ever with low or modest incomes will benefit from free tax preparation clinics. Mr. Huppé will speak to the details of the main estimates. Before I yield the floor to him, I would like to briefly touch on the agency's accomplishments on the compliance front and our plans for the way forward. Most Canadians pay their taxes in full and on time, but some do not pay what they owe. This is not right. This must change. By combating offshore tax evasion and aggressive tax avoidance, as our government is doing, we are protecting the important public services that Canadians rely on. Since my last appearance before this committee, the agency has taken concrete and effective steps to crack down on tax cheats. They are currently conducting audits on over 820 taxpayers and have undertaken criminal investigations of over 30 cases of tax evasion specifically linked to offshore tax havens. Through Budget 2016, the agency increased its information gathering capabilities and improved the tools at its disposal. The agency now has access to more of the information it needs to fulfill its obligations. In the last year, the agency has increased the number of auditors assigned to reviewing offshore tax schemes, promoters, and large multinational corporations. The agency has started reviewing all taxpayers in certain segments of the population identified as high risk. The agency is using external data and publicly available information to maximize its effort to identify noncompliance and has expanded its efforts specifically geared towards intermediaries and making promoters a focus of our criminal investigations, with several underway. As well, the agency is taking a much harder stance on taxpayers who appear on leaked lists of offshore holdings. For example, with the Panama Papers, the agency has over 122 taxpayer audits underway and is reviewing a treasure trove of data linked to these taxpayers. They have also executed search warrants and several criminal investigations involving both participants and facilitators. Audits of the highest risk taxpayers moving money between Canada and 4 foreign tax administrations of interest are underway, and there is more to come. So far, a total of 41,000 transactions have been analyzed, totaling over $12 billion. The agency continues to build its capacity to detect and to crack down on tax cheats. It is developing a powerful business intelligence infrastructure and risk assessment system in order to target, both in Canada and abroad, cases of high-risk tax evasion and abusive tax avoidance. It is clear, Mr. Chair, that our government is committed to protecting the integrity of the Canadian tax system by combating offshore tax evasion and aggressive tax avoidance on all levels. As Minister of National Revenue, I am committed to ensuring that the agency has all the tools and the resources it needs to fulfill its role and meet Canadians' expectations. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Hupé.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee to present the Canada Revenue Agency's main estimates for 2017-2018 and to answer any questions that you may have on the associated funding. Comme vous le savez, l'Agence du Revenu du Canada est responsable.
As you are aware, the Canada Revenue Agency is responsible for the administration of federal and certain provincial and territorial tax programs, as well as the delivery of a number of benefit payment programs. Each year, the agency collects hundreds of billions of dollars of tax revenue for the governments of Canada and distributes timely and accurate benefit payments to millions of Canadians. As the Minister mentioned earlier, in order to fulfill its mandate in 2017-2018, CRA is seeking a total of $4.2 billion through these main estimates. Of this amount, $3.2 billion requires approval by Parliament, whereas the balance of just under $1 billion represents statutory forecasts that are governed under separate legislation. The statutory items include the Children's Special Allowance payments, employee benefit plan costs, and pursuant to Section 60 of the CRA Act, the spending of revenues received for activities administered on behalf of the provinces and other government departments.
Main estimates represent a net increase of $77.2 million when compared with the 2016-17 main estimates authorities. The largest component of this change is an increase of $164.9 million to implement and administer various measures announced through Budget 2016. This includes $62.1 million for measures aimed at enhancing the CRA's efforts to crack down on tax evasion and combat tax avoidance. The incremental funding will be used to hire additional auditors and specialists, develop robust business intelligence infrastructure, increase verification activities, and improve the quality of investigative work that targets criminal tax evaders. $50.9 million for measures aimed at enhancing tax collections by increasing the resources available to tackle the inventory of debt. $43 million for measures to further improve the agency's capacity to deliver client-focused services for Canadians and Canadian businesses. These include improving telephone accessibility, delivering correspondence and other communications that are clear and easy to read, increasing outreach efforts, and in improving the CRA's capacity to resolve taxpayer objections in a timely manner, and $8.9 million for various tax measures, including country-by-country reporting, efforts to protect the charitable sector from the risk of terrorist financing, the new Small Business Quarterly Remitter Initiative, and consultations on the rules governing political activities for charities. Les autres augmentations du budget de l'Agence comprennent
Other increases to the agency's budget include a $51 million adjustment in forecasted payments under the Children's Special Allowances Act due to an increase in the per-child benefit amount under the new Canada Child Benefit Program implemented in July 2016. An increase of $36.3 million for collective bargaining increases associated with employees represented by the Public Service Alliance of Canada bargaining unit, an increase of $30 million related to the administration of the goods and services tax, recognizing the deferral of a savings proposal originally identified as part of Budget 2012's spending review. This represents the ongoing amount of the adjustment included in the CRA's 2016-2017 Supplementary Estimates B. A net increase of $9.9 million in resources for the implementation and administration of enhanced compliance measures as announced in Budget 2014 and Budget 2015.
offset by a $128 million reduction in projected statutory disbursements to the provinces under the Softwood Lumber Products Export Charge Act 2006 as a result of the expiration of the agreement in October 2015. $42 million less in statutory contributions to employee benefit plans and in the forecast of cost recovery revenues pursuant to the Section 20 of the CRA Act for initiatives administered on behalf of the provinces and other government departments. A $24.4 million adjustment related to accommodation and real property services provided by Public Services and Procurement Canada, and finally, a $20.5 million adjustment associated with changes in the funding profile for various measures announced in previous federal budgets. This includes a $9.5 million reduction in professional services, advertising, and travel announced in Budget 2016. The CRA's 2017-18 main estimates do not yet reflect incremental resources for announcements made by the Minister of Finance in the March 2017 budget. The funding required for the implementation and administration of these measures is currently being evaluated by the CRA and will be presented to Treasury Board ministers through formal submissions in the coming months. Any incremental funding required for the 17-18 fiscal year as a result of the Treasury Board submissions will be sought through the supplementary estimates process. Pour conclure, les ressources visées par ces crédits permettront à l'Agence.
In closing, the resources being requested through these estimates will allow the Canada Revenue Agency to continue to deliver on its mandate to Canadians by making it easier for the vast majority of taxpayers who want to pay their taxes and more difficult for the small minority who do not, as well as ensuring that Canadians have ready access to the information they need about taxes or benefits.
We'll be pleased to respond to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner, and thank you, Minister. We'll turn to questions. I might say my apologies for being late. Robert and I had a wonderful view of 415 Wellington building with nobody in it, or with the room with nobody in it. Turning to questions, first round, we'll go to 5 minutes, I think, to give everybody a chance to get on. Mr. Sabara.
Bienvenue, Madame la Ministre.
Welcome, Madam Minister. It's a pleasure to have you here this afternoon.
Which I'll probably understand better myself, too. Quick question, a couple of questions. Our government has done a lot of work and invested a lot of resources into ensuring that all Canadians pay their fair share of taxes and that tax avoidance schemes are investigated and appropriate resources are provided to CRA and so forth. I was wondering if you could comment on the success to date and the investments that we've made on that tangent. Thank you.
Je remercie, Monsieur le Président, je remercie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank my colleague for his question. It really is a priority when it comes to how our government wants to work to deal with tax evasion and aggressive tax planning. The government and the Department of Finance have granted historic sums to the agency. We're talking about $444 million that were granted to the agency. Throughout the year, this allowed us to hire auditors. It also gave us the tools that we needed in order to be able to counter tax evasion and aggressive tax planning. We also worked on eliminating tax loopholes that lead to unfair tax advantages. I could go into more technical details. I will ask Mr. Gallivan to give you more information on technical details.
In the international and aggressive tax planning space, multinationals, our revenue generation target for the last fiscal year that ended March 31st was 380 million. We're over 500 million, so 512. So from an ROI perspective, we're there. But I think the deeper question is, are they the right cases? And so in terms of what we call the third-party penalty, a penalty levied on accountants and lawyers who are involved in that kind of very aggressive tax planning, we're at 44 million. Our Promoters Center, which is one of the investments we received in Budget 2016, a dedicated unit that focuses on promoters of tax schemes. We have 149 kind of wholesalers or retailers in that space. And so I would say that both from a ROI perspective, but probably more importantly from a deterrent perspective, we're on track.
Okay, merci. And just a follow-up question, but slightly switching track. We know in Canada, we want the economy to grow. Croissance, I think, is the word in French to grow our economy. And small businesses are a very important factor in that. Minister, I was wondering if you can comment on how CRA has, I want to say, shifted its role into being more customer service oriented with our small businesses that exist from coast to coast to coast.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. I'd like to say that I'm very interested in everything that has an impact on small businesses. I was raised by parents who had a small business. I come from a rural area where we have a lot of small businesses, and our government is committed to support small business. Small business creates jobs. It develops wealth, and it leads to diversification in our economy. We have implemented in the CRA a service to support small business. And last year, for small and medium-sized businesses, we held a consultation throughout the country to determine with small businesses how our agency could continue improving services and help small businesses not only in getting off the ground, but in allowing them to continue with their activities. Mr. Gallivan will be able to answer to you in greater detail.
To what the minister was saying, we have a liaison officer initiative where we took auditors who used to go to small and medium businesses to do audits. Now they go to give advice and warn them about potential errors. We clarified our outputs. We put all of our outputs through a plain language review, and so in the coming weeks, as you receive your notice of assessments, hopefully you're seeing an improvement in the clarity. We also adjusted the remittance frequency. You know, one of the burdens on business is how often they have to pay us, and you'll see in the mains today, one of the measures that's being funded are system changes to allow businesses to pay less frequently.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you all. Mr. Richards.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and Minister, thank you for being here today. I'd like to take the opportunity to follow up on some questions that I've asked you about previously over several months now regarding the active versus passive income tax rules and how those rules are affecting small businesses like campgrounds. It's quite unfortunate that your Liberal government is continuing to unfairly target small businesses. Your government, and specifically your department, are using those rules to target small businesses like campgrounds by arbitrarily assigning them as passive income when the amount of work that's involved with a business like a campground is anything but passive. And your department has in fact handed out huge new tax bills that will force some of these businesses to have to close their doors. So I wonder if you can explain to me why you believe that some businesses are too small to be small businesses, and why you continue to try to tax them out of business.
Madam Minister.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chair, I'd like to thank my colleague for his question and for the interest that he has in small business. As I said earlier, small business is a priority for me. I come from an area where there is a lot of small business. However, I would tell my colleague that I don't agree with what he has just said. As far as deductions are concerned for small and medium-sized businesses, we have not changed the tax rules, and the same provisions continue to apply, Mr. Chair.
Explain that to some of the campgrounds that are currently taking her department and the revenue agency to court over some of the reassessments that they've received of their tax bills. I'll just list about 3 of them. I'm not going to name the businesses specifically, but I know of one in the GTA area. It was audited for the 2012 through the 2014 tax years and has been sent a tax bill for approximately $250,000 in taxes. I've got a whole list of services that they provide, so they're certainly not a passive business. And then I've got another one here in the Kitchener area, which was audited for 2013 and 2014, received about a $40,000 bill. Again, I've got a whole list of services here that are anything but a passive income that's being derived here. And then another one in the Kawartha area as well, reassessed for 2012, 13, and 14 as well, about $75,000 tax bill. One of these businesses, at least, has been put out of business as a result of the actions of your department. So I wonder if you could maybe try again to explain to us how you're not affecting any of these businesses, how nothing's been changed. The agency has, in fact, changed its interpretation of these rules, and they have, in fact, targeted some of these businesses, and they're putting them out of business, Minister. And I've asked you this over a series of months. You should be well aware of the problem. You should have gone back and checked this out. You clearly haven't done that. I would hope that you're going to take this seriously and stop just repeating back the talking point that somehow you think small businesses are important and somehow they need to pay their fair share. I hope this doesn't go back to the comments the Prime Minister made during the election campaign that small businesses are just a way for rich people to avoid paying taxes. This is a serious matter. These businesses are being put out of business, and you need to take a look at this and be serious about this and realize that you need to be doing something to prevent this. And, when we were in government, we recognized that there was an issue here. We put in place a review of this in our last budget in 2015. Your government cancelled it in your first budget in 2016, and then Revenue Canada started to go after these businesses, these campgrounds. I've given you a few examples. There's others. So I wonder if you can tell me why, after 12 of 13 of the submissions that were received under that review were indicating that these rules were unfair and needed to be changed, why you feel this is not an issue. So can you please tell me when you will stop this war on small businesses? And can you tell me if you're just going to keep repeating these talking points or if you're actually going to get serious and address this?
Minister will need some time to respond to Blake. Minister, the floor is yours and your folks.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would repeat that our government is committed to supporting small, medium-sized businesses, and I would like to repeat to my colleague that we have not changed any of the tax rules, and the same provisions apply. I'd also like to inform the committee that our colleagues, that back in 2014,
You will give me time to...
Yes, I will.
Okay.
We'll give you time. Minister, finish your... Go ahead, and I don't know whether Mr. Galvin wants to add anything or not, but go ahead. The floor is yours.
in 2014-2015, the party in power at that time, my colleague's party, held a consultation on rules and decided not to change any of the rules, that the rules should continue as is. And Mr. Gallivan will be able to provide you with greater details on the provisions regarding campgrounds.
Well, I think Mr. Gallivan might add to what the minister said,
But let me
and then we will give you time.
Mr. Chair, if I could just, because
something that the minister has just said is untrue.
Well,
in fact,
no,
our government initiated the review, and your government.
I'm going to allow Mr.
Take a look at your
Gallivan.
2016 budget.
I'm going to allow Mr. Gallivan to respond. Ms. O'Connell.
Mr. Chair, my point of order is the fact that on this committee, and while I welcome Mr. Richards, but on this committee and all committees, that you ask your question and the witness has equal amount of time to respond. You may not like what you're hearing, but those are the rules,
Okay,
and I would
I don't
ask that
think
we
it's
all be held to those rules.
I don't think it's point order. Point made.
Could I respond to the point of order, though, Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair, could I just respond to the point of order?
It's not a point of order.
Okay.
Mr. Gallivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From an officials level, I can tell you that in previous responsibility, I had responsibility for domestic compliance. There was no national campaign focused on that sector of the Canadian economy, campgrounds. I can tell you that based on the feedback, CRA officials did, not just in the audit area, but our legislative policy area, review the legislation to confirm the understanding and interpretation of the legislation as drafted. And from our perspective, there has been no change in the CRA, either from the interpretative perspective or from an enforcement perspective.
So, Mr. Chair, you indicated that you would give me just a brief amount of time.
We're well over, but I said I'd give you time. Go ahead, ask your.
The only thing I wanted to add was simply this: that the claim is being made that nothing's been changed. I have, in fact, under interpretation bulletin, IT 73R6, small business deduction, there was, in fact, a change to the way these were applied. I can provide this to the minister in both official languages if she'd like, so she can check it out for herself.
Okay, then you can leave a copy of that with the committee for sure. Mr. Gallivan or Minister, do you have anything further to add on that point? Mr. Dussault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll try change the atmosphere a bit with my question. Since you was appointed Minister of the CRA, why is everything written in red? We've gone from blue to red. So why, when I look at the difference between the plan from the 2015 and the one in 2016, before everything was written in blue and now everything's written in red, I would say that in the work that I had to do with the mandate that I received in providing service to clients and improving services, in the work to look at aggressive tax planning, Mr. Dussault, I didn't really think about the color of the report. Thank you. But I'd like to thank you for sharing that with me. Now, a question a little bit more serious now. In your response to the committee, when we produced a report with 14 different recommendations, you gave a response. You made a commitment about many things. There were a lot of delays that we could see. The first one I'd like to refer to is recommendation number 3, which talks about regulations and the way that you deal with these regulations. And this refers, of course, to the KPMG regulations and the negotiated regulations. And I quote, with respect to this R3, and the process and the review of the guidelines with respect to the regulations back in 2017. Now we're May 3rd now, in 2017. Can you give us an update with respect to the new guidelines on the regulations? Mr. Dussault, thank you very much for your question. Indeed. I'd also like to thank the committee for the work done. The report that was prepared by the committee with its 14 different recommendations have all been agreed to by my department. As far as the voluntary disclosure program, I'd like to remind you that last year I conducted a review by Mrs. Brooks and an independent assessor who took a look at the entire process to determine whether everything was in compliance. And yes, everything was in compliance. Yes, we are looking at the 14 recommendations that were made, and Mr. Gallivan will be able to tell you where we are with the recommendations, particularly with respect to recommendation number 3. The review has now been done. This review was not just a review of the agency. We consulted the whole national procedure back in October of this year. I would say that as far as big changes are concerned, it's up to the decision-making committee, which included not only the CRA but members of the Justice Department. So it's up in the future. 100% of this file will be referred to a committee comprised of CRA and justice officials to ensure that there's compliance in the decision-making process and that the decisions be reviewed every year. I'll be following up on that. Thank you very much for that answer. On page 37 of the report, in the last paragraph, it said that you're going to publicize the tax schemes for tax avoidance, but you even did some ads where we saw people in handcuffs on your website. In the last few years, we haven't really seen any people who've been convicted or imprisoned on these charges. I would like you to assure Canadians that there are going to be prosecution more frequently, and so we see in your photos on your website were actually misleading because nobody has actually been charged over the past few years. Nobody has. Can you tell me, has anyone actually been put in prison? And I'd like to thank my colleague for his colleague, and indeed, as far as our government is concerned, I would like to tell you that as a result of the work that our government is doing and will continue doing with respect to tax evasion and avoidance, I should point out that in the statement I gave earlier, we have ongoing files on criminals. There are investigations underway as we speak, and as far as tax avoidance is concerned, Mr. Gallivan has a lot more information about the technical side of things. We know that Canadians want to be kept informed about what's happening. We know that Canadian wants everyone to pay their fair share, and people who do criminal things should be treated as criminals. Thank you.
O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here. Minister, I want to start off by asking a question, and my questions, frankly, will be similar to what I've asked in the past because I am interested in seeing the progress. And first off, I do want to acknowledge the fact that in this committee's recommendations regarding tax evasion, tax avoidance, I want to thank you and acknowledge the fact that you accepted all of this committee's recommendations. So I look forward to seeing how that unfolds as well. But specifically, I want to talk about the tax gap. I've raised this issue before. Previous to our government taking over and you being appointed minister of the CRA, Senator Down had actually done a lot of work in regards to tax gap. And he had, in the previous government, had asked the PBO to bring forward the tax gap number. What is this number? And under the previous government, the CRA refused to work with the PBO and provide that information. I'm curious, how can we really tackle the issues of tax avoidance and tax evasion if we don't know how big the problem is? Are you doing anything or dealing with anything to finally release the information about the tax gap so we can properly assess the areas of tax evasion and tax avoidance?
Okay. Je remercie ma collègue.
I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. The government made a commitment to study the tax gap, something that the Conservative Party never wanted to do. And our approach is very different because we are basing ourselves on facts, and I asked the agency to do this work, and the CRA works in cooperation with the PBO on the tax gap, and a first report was submitted last June. The work is ongoing. There are other meetings that will be taking place, and we feel it's important to use all the tools that are available to us to ensure that Canadians are confident about the fairness of our tax system. And I would repeat my commitment. Our commitment as a government is to continue on with this work and to make it public.
I'm sorry, I heard that the last report, or the first report, was published last June. Is that just the internal initial report? And is there any expectation of when, any timeline when you might expect some of this information to be released to the public?
Il y a un premier rapport qui a été déposé en juin dernier. Puis la suite des travaux, M. Gallivan est plus au courant des dates au niveau technique.
I just want to come back to the history, perhaps, from the CRA perspective. It wasn't necessarily a refusal, but we, like many tax jurisdictions, have concern over the accuracy and the difficulty with measuring a tax gap. In terms of cooperation with parliamentary officers, we had privacy concerns and legal advice that prevented us from cooperating to the full extent that they might have desired. The minister's correct, though. Last June we did release information on the GST. This June, instead of just kind of pointing out how complicated it is, we've partnered with the Canadian Tax Foundation to hold an international summit on tax gap. And through the Canadian Tax Foundation, we're bringing in international experts, we're inviting stakeholders, and we're going to explore these methodological difficulties with measuring the tax gap. So we're actually seeking to engage academics, statisticians, and others to kind of get past it's difficult and hard to measure the tax gap and develop actual strategies that will bring us to, I think, what we all want, which is a fair tax regime.
Thank you. And through the chair, do you have a timeline on that work? I mean, there are lots of countries that are producing a tax gap, and I appreciate the minister's commitment to actually finally moving forward with this and taking that leadership in actually moving this forward. But there have been lots of jurisdictions that do this. So do you have a time frame? And I appreciate that you want to come up with the right kind of measures. But how soon can we see? Because we won't really know if our investments are really tackling this issue until we can track this tax gap.
The meeting is scheduled for the first week of June this year, and so we would expect the articles and advice to follow later this year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Mr. Bouteille.
I welcome Minister and Mr. Gallivan and Monsieur Ipe. And the question is a couple of housekeeping questions regarding the mail out or the mailing of tax returns by some Canadians. They mail out, they can't file it electronically, and it seemed that those people were told that they will not be able to receive their refunds because Canada Revenue Agency is not looking at these files until May 6. So the question, why are we treating Canadian taxpayers differently, whether they chose to file electronically or manually? I think those complaints came to me, they're actual complaints, and I would like to address them, and I would like an answer on that.
Clear on what the question is? There looks to be puzzlement.
I'll repeat.
If you could.
So people or taxpayers that mailed their tax returns, okay, they're not receiving, they were told by CRA that they're not be able to receive their refunds because CRA is not looking at their files until May 6. So that means Canadian taxpayers are being treated differently. Whoever already filed electronically, they receive their money, and the one that filed manually, they still have to wait probably another month from now because May 6th is on Saturday. Okay. So why is that? Where's the efficiency, and how can we show Canadians that we treat them equally?
Okay. Madam Minister.
Okay.
Je remercie mon collègue pour sa question.
I would like to thank my colleague for his question and for his care for individuals. Not everybody has access to electronic filing services, and I'm well aware of that. I can tell you that when it comes to customer service, for me, everybody has to be treated the same way and fairly. It's not because somebody sends their statement on a paper copy that they will be treated less well than anyone else. I am pleased that about 90% of the public files electronically. But when the paper copies arrive, they're treated efficiently, just like the electronic ones.
Not. That's the complaint we've received. I've received, my office received complaints of that fashion. And if 90% of Canadians comply, the other 10% are still waiting, and they're going to be suffering as a fact of that. So I expect from the extra resources that you got at CRA and the extra money that you'll be getting last year and this year, that there will be a level of efficiency. Also in relation to the same question, we were also told that the taxpayers have difficulty during past tax season to find tax forms in their local post offices. So is that another step into the phasing out completely people that they still want or prefer to file manually? Again, why is now, and you've got the resources, why can't these be phased out without being a painful process for taxpayers?
Je remercie mon collègue pour sa question. Effectivement,
I would like to thank my colleague for his question. At the beginning of tax season, I was informed that we were having difficulty receiving forms in French in certain areas, and there was also some trouble in getting forms to certain other locations. I can tell you that I made sure that I contacted relevant stakeholders in the agency to inform them of the situation, but my colleague can give you more information about the agreements that we have with Canada Post when it comes to paper tax forms.
We have a very effective partnership with Canada Post to get those paper guides distributed all across the country. It does get reported to us that individual outlets, whether it be in a retail center or otherwise, individual employees not understanding this can sometimes destroy the guides or move them. But as soon as we're informed of this, we work through Canada Post to get that location restocked. So, what I would offer is if you're hearing that information, the best thing you can do is advise the agency, given the large number of postal locations all across the country. Individual incidents like this can occur. The best thing is for us to respond as soon as we hear about it to make sure we replenish the paper stock. Sometimes it can be aggressive taxpayers who grab bundles of them. There's been reports of that as well. They just take all the paper that's available.
Well, I think that the perception, thanks for taking care of this, but the perception out there is that Canada Revenue Agency is not providing enough copies to post offices. That's why some people are suffering or falling behind, and that is not fair for taxpayers. I have a minute?
We'll give you a very quick question.
Okay, just in reference to my colleagues here about the campground, I would like to refer on record to recommendation 31 from this Finance Committee on that the Government of Canada recognize the income earned by campgrounds and storage facilities as active business income for the purpose of determining eligibility for the small business deduction. So that's to be added to the records on file.
Okay. Thank you, and I think that is in our recommendations. Mr. Fergus.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, puis bienvenue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to the committee, Madam Minister, and welcome to your colleagues, Mr. Huppé and Mr. Gallivan. It's a pleasure to have you here today. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to ask questions of you, because I think I am the newest member of the Committee of Finance. I was very interested in your opening statement when you mentioned all the changes that your agency, or I should say, introduced last fall and in November 2016. I would like to know if you could tell me more about renewing the agency's services as announced in November 2016. How will this improve efficiency in executing the agency's mandate? I would like to thank my colleague for his question. As was mentioned in my mandate letter, one of the priorities that were set out was customer service. Our government committed to ensuring that the agency provides the best service to Canadians from one end of the country to the other. The renewal of services intends to group processing activities when it comes to processing and when it comes to the national verification and recovery centers. I also had an opportunity to visit the agency's offices throughout Canada. I'm concluding those visits now. I was very surprised to meet employees and to see with them, when it comes to service renewal, how things were happening on the ground, because it did lead to changes. Employees and branches are working together, and they care about service to Canadians. I was pleasantly surprised throughout the country to meet people who, for the very first time, were telling me that they had never met the Minister of National Revenue and they had never seen the Minister in their offices or their regions. When it comes to service renewal, this has led to us consolidating services in the regions, because for me, the regions are important throughout the entire country. The only office where there was a closure was an office in Toronto, but there are already 3 other CRA offices that could take on that workload. We made sure that we worked together with the unions in order to accompany employees and to support employees throughout all the changes that were made. I can tell you that throughout the country, I've been meeting employees for the Canada Revenue Agency that really care about customer service. And I would like to communicate the message that, as a social worker by training, that customer service is a priority for me. And everyone has to be treated in the same way, from the poorest to the richest.
Ministre, vous êtes député québécois.
Madam Minister, you are representing Quebec, as am I. Both of us have the great pleasure of filling out 2 forms when we produce our income tax statements. In my riding, it's a riding that is on the border. Many of my constituents work on the Ontario side, but they pay their taxes in Quebec. Often, even with the federal government, this makes things complicated for RL1s and T4s. Talking about changes to services, is the agency aware of this situation? What means are being taken to facilitate things for people in our ridings to fill out both tax returns to make sure that it's done as easily as possible? You are quite right. In Quebec, one of its distinguishing features is producing 2 different tax returns, and the agency is working closely with the Department of Revenue for Quebec. I met my counterpart, Minister Litau, several times. When it comes to the details of your question, I could ask Mr. Gallivan to answer. Thank you. We have many conventions for exchanges with provinces, whether it be for services or observations, and we try to share information. And we try to make sure that we can do more with certain provinces. For example, some citizens can deal with both tax returns in the same web session. We are working on our systems to make sure that they can exchange data as much as possible to help citizens to meet their tax obligations voluntarily.
I know, Minister, can you, if we hold, there's 4 questioners left, and everybody would have been on. If we hold them all to 3 minutes, can you stay? It'll run us till about almost 22 or 22 minutes to.
Écoutez, ça va me faire plaisir parce que tout le monde.
It would be my pleasure to answer the questions of everybody around the table. We all have the same interest, which is to work for the benefit of Canadians and have a better tax system. It is my pleasure to answer questions.
Thank you, Minister. We appreciate that, and we'll go to 3 minutes rounds, which will give everybody a couple of questions. Mr. Richards again. Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, so Minister, I guess I'll just kind of continue. Obviously, I had a chance to share with you the perspective of the interpretation bulletin. Maybe you've had a little chance to reflect on that. That was, by the way, that was from August of 2016. So that was not a Conservative government. That was, in fact, your government. I will reiterate again that in our last budget, in 2015, we in fact initiated a review of these rules. And there was obviously a reason why that review was initiated. 12 of the 13 submissions that were received indicated that they felt the rules were unfair and recommended there should be some change. Then, of course, the interpretation bulletin from August 23rd of 2016 made that change. Then these campgrounds started to be assessed and reassessed with different interpretation of the rules about active versus passive income. Frankly, the idea that a business is too small to be a small business is quite ridiculous anyway, but that was the interpretation. As I've indicated, I gave you a list of a few, there's others, that have been, in fact, impacted and affected because of this change in the interpretation. And there's others, and some of them are being put out of business. And I know there's a lot of businesses that are out there that are in fear right now because they wonder if they'll be the next business model that will be approached and attacked under these kinds of changes that really seem to be quite arbitrary. And then, as my colleague Mr. Abouteif read to you earlier, in this own committee's pre-budget report for the 2017 budget, the recommendation was that the Government of Canada recognize the income earned by campgrounds and storage facilities as active business income for the purpose of determining eligibility for the small business deduction. So, Minister, it really seems to me like the only thing that your Liberal government isn't ignoring is another attempt to be able to punish small businesses. So I want to give you another chance, Minister. Will you take another look at this? Will you actually try to make sure this war on small businesses stops? Or are you just going to keep repeating these talking points about people paying their fair share?
Madam Minister and Mr. Gallivan.
Je remercie mon collègue pour sa question.
Thank you to my colleague for his question. What I will repeat to my colleague is that the rules have not changed. At the CRA, what we do at the Canada Revenue Agency is to apply the laws that are, and if there are changes to the law, it would be important to work with the Department of Finance. When it comes to the Canada Revenue Agency, no changes have been made to tax rules. They continue to apply as they did under your government when conducted consultations and did not change the rules at that time. We continue to apply the exact same rules.
I really don't know whether to laugh or cry. That is actually embarrassing on your part.
Mr. Richards will be turning to Mr. Greywall, but I will say, Madam Minister, on this issue, I think it's fair to say on campgrounds and RV parks, we are all getting calls. We've all been, I think probably every member in this committee has been lobbied on this issue. So it is a serious issue, and we are hearing from the tourism sector, so I would say to look closely at the issue with your officials and make sure that people are not been targeted. I went through the memo that Mr. Richards tabled. All members have a copy, and we just want to. I think as a committee, we looked at this before, and we just want to make sure that campgrounds and RV parks are not being overly targeted and been treated fairly. That's all I'll say in the matter. Mr. Graywell.
Recognizing that reality.
Mr. Graywell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, and the officials for coming today. We really appreciate it. Minister, I think one of the things that we can all agree on at this table, irrespective of party, is that we're all here to help solve problems for our constituents. It's sometimes really difficult to solve a constituent tax problem with the CRA, just because we have to fax the consent form in. They don't tell us very much information over the phone. Sometimes, constituents' accounts are being garnished, and it really becomes an issue of how to have enough money to put food on the table, which was a case in my constituency. So, our government has made significant investments into the CRA. Can you let me know how the investments made into our appeals process will help on a local level?
Le processus d'appel.
The appeals process?
OK. Écoutez, au niveau du...
Listen, when it comes to the appeals process, I can tell you that during the winter, I met the Auditor General. We discussed this. A report was tabled, and when it comes to the Auditor General's report and to objections, we accepted all of the recommendations that were set out. There were some recommendations that had to deal with reducing the time required for processing objections. That action plan is going to be submitted shortly, and we're going to make the action plan public to ensure that people know where their situation regarding their objection is at. We know that there is a backlog when it comes to objections.
And what we're trying to do is to reduce these objections. When objections are, we want to ensure objections are treated or processed as quickly as possible. That's part of our priorities.
And maybe your officials can weigh in on this as well. In the training that we give our officers at the CRA, is there any, it just seems that they're so rigid in the interpretations of the rules, and that there's no flexibility on a common sense alternative in terms of if you owe $10,000 and you're a single mother who has 2 children who's living paycheck to paycheck, and you've paid $5,000 or $6,000, that there's $4,000 left. Let's call it even at $2,000 and close this file and go on. There's a lot of frustrations at a local constituency level on some of these cases that you just feel that, and then when Canadians hear stories of tax evasion, and congratulations to you, Minister, that we're doing a great job to make sure that the wealthiest Canadians and our corporations are paying our fair share. But on the other side of that pendulum, we have this problem. And for me, this problem is very, very important because we want to be able to solve people's minor CRA issues, close these files, and so they can keep on working hard to put food on the table and send their children to post-secondary education.
Thanks for your question. As I already said, what's important to us is that everyone pays his or her fair share and that everybody receives his or her entitlements. My objective is to have an efficient service and that Canadians are really put at the very heart of the issue. That was part of my mandate letter. In the agency, we have services not to put people into to shut down businesses or put them in bad situations, but to come to an agreement with people so that we'll have a tax base enabling the government reinvesting to invest in public services, education, health services, which will enable us to provide citizens with services, the most needy, for example. That's what the purpose of our work is. There is always a way to reach an agreement at the CRA. Every case is treated on its own merits. Some people are there to help people and come to agreements with them. Mr. Huppé?
Actually, a new advertisement that was on the collection front, reminding Canadians that we're there to work with them, considering the realities of on a case-by-case basis to make different payment arrangements. So the flexibility, and we have the capacity to do that, obviously.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Mr. Dussault, 3 minutes, and then the last questioner will be Mr. Ouellette.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Et j'aimerais revenir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to go back to the answer you gave to the committee report. Mr. Gallivan, perhaps I could ask this question of you. With respect to the conflict of interest, you were to set up a high-level interdisciplinary committee to look at the pre-mandate and conflict of interest guidelines. You said that we want to put guidelines into play as quickly as possible. What really annoys Canadians is when they see officials participating in cocktail parties at the Rideau Club, or could you tell us whether pre-mandate and conflict of interest guidelines are going to be tightened? Yes. We can look at it this two ways. There was the review that looked at the tools that we had available to us, and we made some changes. For example, the employee who leaves the agency, well, there's a requirement now. The employee has to contact the previous employer and there are 3 or 4 meetings to look at senior officials. We spent 2 days on this last week. We have directors in all regions who participate in this meeting in order to come up with a good exchange of ideas, exchange at a theoretical level are always good, but we have to see what works in practice. So we've heard from 20 different consultants. We've spent 2 days looking at this, and later on in the year, we're going to come forward with some changes in line with this process. So I'll follow this with a great deal of interest. Recommendation number 9, you said that you would look at the Memorandum of Understanding between the CRA and the Public Prosecutor's Office in order to accelerate this process. And here I refer to the criminal investigations. And those, we want to ensure that matters are turned over to the Public Prosecutor's Office quickly. So I think it's very important that we update our Memorandum of Understanding. I meet with my counterpart quarterly. We do have a draft document on this Memorandum of Agreement. It's been improved. We are doing a consultation. We're now working on a final product, but as far as changes are concerned, I could say that most of the changes have already been written, and then there'll be an approval process that'll take a couple of months, and by the fall, the whole study should be complete. Thank you very much, Mr. Gallivan.
Mr. Ouellette.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup pour.
Thank you for coming here, Minister. That's very kind of you. I would like to just ask you one question on.
It's a $51 million adjustment forecasted payments under the Child Special Allowances Act. And this is due to an increase in the per-child benefit amount under the New Canada Child Benefit Program implemented in July 2016. Now, the Child Special Allowances Act pays government money when children are held or in the care of the state. So in essentially what we're doing is, so instead of the money going to the children, it actually goes to provincial governments and agencies. And the state, though, it seems to be a very poor type of parent, because I've met individuals who have been bounced around from foster family to foster family in my riding, up to 77. One individual, even last week I met, was in over 100 foster families throughout his life in 18 years, which is an incredible number. So I was just wondering, why do we give the money to the state? Why does it not go to these children who need it most, who don't have the social and family structures that many of us enjoy? Why do we give it to governments really don't need it? Why not place it in a trust so that these children at some point in the future then can, when they turn 18 or 21, then access these funds to pay for education or for housing? Because often what happens is they end up in the homeless shelter where I meet them, because they're kicked out of foster families, and when they're turning 18, because they're not valuable anymore to anyone. And that's not to say that there's not good foster families, but it seems that we're doing a disservice to some of these children. And so I was wondering if if your deputy ministers had any intention of looking at this and trying to understand what the problems are related to this. Anyways, thank you very much. And then I just had one final question related to that. Is there, if you could give the rates for the number of people in the country who are actually using the Canada Child Benefit? Are all families actually applied? Have they applied? And what the penetration rate is related to that program?
Fait que vous avez deux questions.
You've asked me two questions. I'll answer your first question with respect regarding the $51 million allocated to children who are under the guardianship of the state or in foster families. So people who don't have parental responsibility. Yes, these people, this money is allocated to the state because it's a province's responsibility to look after these children, provide services to the foster families. And it helps children because these children have special needs when they're young and who are living in these foster families. That's what the money's earmarked for. Should. You can't allocate money directly to children because it's the governments who, in turn, look after the management of social services. The problem lies in the fact that there are, I just wanted to make one point, the agencies take the money, they pay for trips to go to Las Vegas or elsewhere, and they really abuse the system. And the money doesn't go to help the children. I know that's not your mistake. You're very removed from the problem, but I was just wondering if at one point we could take a look at that together to ensure that the money is really going to those who need it most. I have noted what you've said. I can't give you more information now because this is a matter that comes under provincial jurisdiction. The other question that you asked me was whether or not everyone, about the question about the families who get the child benefits. This is a very important program. Everywhere I go, I try to convey the message that the people who haven't filled out their tax return will not be entitled to receive the child benefit. And so in the meetings that I hold, when I visit the communities, whether they be Aboriginal communities or other types of communities, when I'm out in the field, I tell people it's very important that they do some outreach and talk to everyone. It's a responsibility of the elected members of Parliament, of the elected provincial members, those who are elected to municipal boards, the people who work closely with families. I ask everyone to check with these people. I ask them to ask the following question: have you done a tax return? And it not to penalize people, simply because people who don't fill out their tax return, they won't have access to certain programs. They can go back 10 years in time. Some people, I've heard about people who receive $50,000 in tax credits and even more. So I would encourage you all to check in each of all your communities, in all of your organizations, encourage people to fill out their tax returns so that they get all of their entitlements. As long as I'm Minister of the CRA, I certainly don't want to make sure that the needy suffer. But I've often said, as for the people who are abusing the system, I won't abandon them. I will keep up the fight.
Passion, Minister, in that answer. With that, that ends the rounds with the Minister. Minister, I think we will turn to officials, but just to first of all thank you and the department for your response on tax avoidance and tax evasion. The 14 recommendations that we recommended, the department has accepted those recommendations. We appreciate that. I would say there is maybe a takeaway, and that is the document on the eligibility requirement for campgrounds in order to claim the small business deduction. I think on that one, what you're hearing from members at the committee is CRA should proceed with caution. We're hearing too many complaints, and I don't mind saying that. We've heard your answers. We respect them. But all I would say is maybe the CRA should proceed with caution in that area. So with that, Minister, thank you very much for your presentation. And do any members have questions for officials? We do have a few minutes. Thank you, Minister. All the best. Mr. Dussault and Mr. Elbouteyev over here. Okay, Mr. Dussault first.
First of all, on page 60 of the corporate plan, on page 60 you talk about human resources. I know that comes under the main estimates. So it's for 2017-2018, you'll be have a certain number of staffs. We've seen a slight decrease in 2017-2018, and then by 2020, there will be even fewer employees. So how do you explain this decrease in FTEs? Where are you investing resources? There are $47 billion in the 2016 budget without counting for the other amounts in the 2017 budget. So how do you explain this discrepancy? It depends on when we prepare the report. Over the years, when we get money, you gave the example of the 2017 budget. The full-time equivalents are not included in that. It'll be in next year. When we receive, for money received in previous years, with a forecast that accompany those figures, there's money that is expiring, or so this is based on new investments. What we're not entitled to do is forecast before budgetary decisions are made. So we're basing ourselves on the authorization we had at that time in the year, given all of the decisions made to date. So it's understandable that for most departments, you will see over the years these figures will be going down, and these figures are adjusted as new decisions are made. So if we have money that's supposed to be finished or unused, we're going to have to wait for a renewal of the funds for the next budget before we can make a forecast. I hear what you're saying, but that doesn't really answer the question that this numbers should be taken into account between 2016, 2017, 2018. We don't see any difference. It stays at the same time, about 3,670 employees. Same thing on page 57 in 2016. There was goes down to 918, 917 by 2020. So I don't see where this 400,000 figure appears. Well, the figures that you've just quoted pertain to are all divided. You will see that these figures include an increase, but there are other initiatives and where the funds are expiring. We recently saw measures taken that might be renewed, but all of the other measures that are ending, it's really, that explains why this is the situation. If you go down and probe down into the details and look at a breakdown, you will see that the $44 million include all of this. But over the years, there are other initiatives that are taken where the funds are going to expire.
I would like to thank you first and then go back to the question that was asked by my colleague, Ms. O'Connell, on the tax gap. And I do understand fully that you may not be able, or you're probably being hesitant to even come up with any figure with that regard. But the one thing that strikes me to go back to this point is with Mr. Gallivan, when talking about the ROI, which is, you didn't seem to be very keen to or confident that the ROI is going to be satisfactory from business sense, which is, at the end of the day, this is an investment, a huge investment that by taxpayers to the CRA. So if you're hesitant on the ROI, that means you're not releasing any figures on the tax gap. And I can see from a taxpayer's point that at least come up with some figures. You must have some idea about the tax gap. And then when you finish the investigation and the study on it, you can come back to Canadian with some of that. So I'm hoping with you guys I can get a better answer than what I would be getting from the minister, because so far we haven't been able to get anything from the minister, although I've addressed her in writing, and after 45 days I got nothing but the same answer that she gave today. So can you please elaborate on this at some point?
Sure. First, I'll go back to this idea of revenue generation. So we have a number that we call revenue impact. Last year, it was just under 13 billion, 12.8 billion. This year, well over 13 billion. That number is up roughly 46% over the last 4 or 5 years. Tactically, that's successful. We're getting more taxes for the Canadian public. Strategically, if we continue to find people not complying, we haven't deterred them. The other number we have is the 460 billion that comes in voluntarily overall. That's the number that really needs to go up. So in other words, if we continue to perform audits and we continue to find that taxpayers are non-complying, there must be something about how we audit or the consequences of audit that isn't getting through. Back to the point about criminal investigations, extra penalties for preparers. In terms of the tax gap, our concern or our challenge is how do we allocate those resources? How much do we resource to multinationals? How much do we resource to small and medium businesses? How much on aggressive tax planning? We have to make those judgments. So for us, it's more, what are the 8 or 9 different tax gaps? How much is in the underground economy? How much is offshore? And moving it around. And so for us, it's not necessarily determinative to know how big it is. It's the relative size, because our job is to reallocate those resources. Those countries that do have a measure of tax gap, we have consulted those tax authorities, and they haven't found performance lifts. Their results aren't up by 46% after they started measuring the tax gap. And so we have been reluctant. Now, under this new government, we have been working and taking steps to understand those challenges and find solutions. So the Department of Finance and the CRA partnered last year to release a number on GST. We're holding a conference this June with experts, academics, statisticians to understand how we can produce something that might be useful for you, useful for the agency, that would make us more transparent. If we had have had the answer, I think the agency would have done it sooner. And so now all I can talk about is our process to come up with an answer.
Okay. I'm not specifically asking to reveal your strategy, although you have the right to do so, or to don't. It's up to you. But there's over almost $1 billion between last year's budget and this year's budget for CRA. That's a very significant number. Do I understand from what you just said that you haven't found where you can lend those money? How are you going to distribute those money into different areas, and how, where are your priorities? I mean, at the end of the day, you've been in business from before this government, and now will continue to be for as long as it takes. So where are the priorities, and how are we going to tell Canadians that this is going in the right direction with a significant investment that you're getting, about $1 billion for 2 years?
The budgets were quite specific and quite clear that our points of focus were multinational enterprises, aggressive tax planning, particularly offshore tax planning, criminal investigations, and the underground economy. In fact, one of the important elements is we were able to increase our level of focus on all of those areas where in other years, at other times, we've had to make reallocation decisions. And so those sectors are the sectors that we're focused on. I'd also talk about making increased use of technology and data. We now have access to electronic funds transfers over $10,000. Country by country reporting by multinationals is coming in 2 years. Something called the Common Reporting Standard, to which 100 countries have signed on, will give us worldwide banking information on Canadian citizens around the world. And so, in addition to those priority areas, our priority approach is to leverage data to be much more targeted, to not be in the doorstep of compliant small business, but really be focused on those who are most aggressive. The final thing I'll say is a big focus is on the promoters or facilitators. Those firms, accountants or lawyers that are kind of the facilitators, the wholesalers. And so hopefully I've answered your question. I think back to the ROI, this year, again, in my branch, on a target of $380 million, we're at $500 million. And we are confident of being able to meet those revenue generation targets. What we want to do is meet those targets and deter and ensure that there's sufficient consequences that we don't see the same people non-complying 2 or 3 years down the road.
Thank you both, and thank you for the explanation, Mr. Gallivan. Thorough explanation on that point. So with that, we will turn to a vote on the main estimates for the Canada Revenue Agency 2017-2018. Shall vote, are we ready for the vote? Shall vote 1 under Canada Revenue Agency less the amount granted in interim supply carry in the amount of $2,380 million plus. On division? On division, carried. Shall vote 5 under Canada Revenue Agency less the amount granted in interim supply carry in the amount of $44,522,758.50. On division? Shall I carried? Shall I report vote 1 and vote 5 under Canada Revenue Agency to the House? Agreed? Agreed. Then with that, thank you, gentlemen, and we will suspend for a few minutes and then go into committee business. Suspended.
still televised.
Yeah. We'll reconvene. Pierre, you at. Can we? I think you have a motion. Do you? Is that what you're raising your hand for? Can we go through the report from the subcommittee yesterday first, and deal with that so we get the witnesses in order? We'll have time. We're not under too much time constraint. We'll get to your motion. So members have been given a copy of the 6th report of the subcommittee on agenda and procedure. You have it before you. Do I need to read it?
It looks like
It'll be on the record, and we need a mover for that, do we not? Pardon?
Yes.
But you're going to allow discussion?
Yes, yeah. So the 6th report is before you. It really deals with the aspects of Bill C-44, the Budget Implementation Act. We'd hear from officials on Monday and Tuesday, Parliamentary Budget Officer and related witnesses, current and former Parliamentary Budget Officers and related witnesses on Wednesday, May 10th, and really all other matters related to the schedule and how we would deal with C-44. So instead of reading it all, I consider it moved. It's up for discussion. I think Mr. Leipert.
I just had a suggestion on point number 2. I've observed that if you schedule 4 hours, people will find a way to fill 4 hours. Could we operate on the premise that it's a meeting on Monday, and if necessary, we have the Tuesday meeting, and it would be up to the chair that if we were close enough to concluding on Monday, that we could extend it for an hour and get it done on Monday. I'm just concerned about if we schedule 4 hours, somebody will fill it.
I think we can go with that understanding. Our understanding at the subcommittee was that if we needed Tuesday, we'd use it. If we didn't, we wouldn't. So I think we can agree to that understanding.
Yeah, and if we need to go an extra hour on Monday, let's get it done. Let's do it that way.
Okay.
Oh, Raj, I'm becoming a liberal.
Ron, we are
Is
televised.
this a public meeting?
That could be quoted.
Don't worry, Rod. No one will believe
I understand the feeling. Did you want in, Mr. Deltel?
Yes, I would like to add something to the discussion. When we see at the agenda we have, and especially the calendar, we would propose to have another meeting on Thursday, May the 11th, and the time that we suggest is just after question period, 3:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. on Thursday the 11th.
Make it 5:30. The others are 5:30.
Oh, 5, okay, 3:30 to 5:30 p.m.
On May 11th, just for hearing witnesses?
Yep.
Okay. Are we okay with that? Do we need to vote on it? If we do get through all the witnesses, we could. I think it'd be understood. We could drop one of the other meetings.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask, Mr. Chair.
All right, then that would be 3:30, 5:30 on the 11th.
So,
Robert?
Personally, I'm not in favor of on the 11th or even the 18th. I think I'd prefer to sit longer on the Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and have that time to do other things. Because we're already moving people around, having to book translators, having to get analysts here and myself as included, and I just think it would be more efficient if those times, if the witnesses could all be included or bunched together in those 3 days, it would be much more efficient use of our time rather than having to come back again on a Thursday.
We're going to, when were we going to meet on witnesses? We've asked for the deadline to submit witnesses on the 5th.
Monday morning.
And the subcommittee is going to look at witnesses on the 8th. depending on the number as the subcommittee, could we leave it to the subcommittee to kind of work out that schedule, whether we add another hour or two? Oh, but then we're still before the 11th, and if we think we have to add the 11th, add it. I don't think anybody's being reluctant on adding time. We know we got to do the work.
I mentioned to my colleague when he raised it was that I think part of the discussion at subcommittee was whether the clerk would have time to get the witnesses lined up for the 11th. So could we, within that discussion at the subcommittee, if the clerk tells us that we can get it ready for the 11th, that we can go ahead? But part of it would be whether the time lag is long enough.
I expect there's probably organizations in the Ottawa area that would be able to come. So I don't think there's any real opposition to either extending the hours or meeting on the 11th. Okay? And once we have the witness list, then if we have the witness list in at 12 o'clock on Friday, we may be able to pretty near determine that Friday afternoon. You know, on the national, I think we're all going to be in agreement on some national organizations that should come in budget implementation, so we might be able to line them up for Thursday. And as well, the minister is scheduled to come on either the 17th or 18th, and I don't think we'll get him for the 3 hours that are scheduled. We might get him for an hour. So can we work from that, Gerard? Okay, agreed. And I believe, is there anything else on the motion? I know Mr. Leipert has a motion that on the report. Could we what the clerk tells me, what we didn't discuss at subcommittee is a time for clause by clause on the 29th. We usually have a time with a deadline, correct? Go ahead, Ron.
My recollection was last year the government introduced a motion which is in essence was a closure motion on clause by clause. So it would seem to me that unless the government proposed to do the same thing, we did not have a time limit on it until it was introduced as part of a motion last year.
We can, on that, at 3:30 to, do we want to agree on a time to do it within 3:30 to 6:30 or 7:30 and get it done?
Well,
and if we don't? We'd have to sit the next day if we couldn't get it done on that.
I think we should put a 2-hour, leave it as a 2-hour meeting, and then if we need to extend it, we extend it.
Okay, and the government has the option if they want to put a motion with the time frame in it at any time. Mr. Dussault.
Time we need to do it, and if we're not done in the first meeting, we'll reconvene and continue at another meeting. I mean, we don't have to put now a time limit for the meeting. We'll see if we happen to be done by 2 hour or 3 hour, or if we need more, we'll do more.
Thank you, Dussault. Mr. Sabera.
Thank you, Chair. Would there be anything we could do what we did last time if we were not on the 29th, if we were not finished the clause by a certain time, then we would deem the clauses all moved and completed.
That would require a motion that in fact would state that, and there's ample time for, I think, folks to think about it if they want to bring that motion forward at some point in time. It doesn't have to be done today. Okay? So we're agreed on the report of the subcommittee. Agreed? Agreed. Mr. Leipert, I believe you had a motion related to the subcommittee report. And members, I think, have a copy of that. You want to explain it?
Yeah, I won't read it. Everyone has a copy of it. The intent here, and again, for the benefit of the entire committee, is that it's suggesting that our chair invite several other committees to study subject matter that probably is a little more extensive and more narrow in scope, that other committees are probably in a better position to call a few witnesses. And so it's laid out that this move to that the chair invite the chairs of the other committees of these 4 other committees. And I don't think there's much more that I need to say on it right now.
Okay, then it's open for discussion. Just one point, Ron, in my reading of the motion, the point, sub-point number 1 on it, the Standing Committee on National Defence look at Part 4, Division 12. I went back and looked at that, and it's really related to the Committee on Veterans. Just change it to the Committee on Veterans. Then that's agreed. Ms. O'Connell, who wants in? Ms. O'Connell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that was going to be one point, so if that's changed, I have no problem supporting that as well. In terms of, well, deal with the last one because I think it's easiest. In terms of the last recommendation to refer Part 4, Division 18, that's regarding the infrastructure bank, but that's a finance program. And so I have concerns about asking for the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities when it's been this committee that's talked about the infrastructure bank. So I understand the rationale behind getting further input from the committees who might oversee these topics generally, but this is one that is a finance issue. So I'll say that, and then if Ron or anyone else has comments, then I'm happy to hear it. And the only other one is on the second item, Part 4, Division 13, Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. When I read that section, it's quite small. It's just dealing with visas. So I'm just wondering what the rationale is to get that additional feedback, because it wasn't very comprehensive in terms of a policy. So if you could provide some more rationale on at least those two. But I certainly don't have an issue in principle with what you're asking.
So, Mr. Chair, if I could respond, I'll go in reverse. So, with respect to number 2, citizen immigration, our member of that committee, Mr. Tilson, has written a letter to the chair, and it states, as you know, it's become customary for the various standing committees to review sections of budget legislation that pertain to their particular mandates. Division 13 of Bill C-44 contains amendments to the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, the primary statutory instrument governing immigration to Canada. I trust this is something you and the committee will wish to examine once the bill is past second reading. I don't know much more about it than that, but I would suggest this, that it's up to the committee chair to determine whether or not it is worth, and in this case I'm talking about the chair of the Citizen and Immigration Committee, to determine whether or not they should study, and will be responding to this particular letter in some form anyway. So what I would suggest on this one is if we could leave it on, and then it would be up to that chair to determine whether it's worthy of further study at citizen immigration. I don't know any more about it than that. The second part about it, number 4, relative to the infrastructure bank. You know, this is a very, and I don't disagree that the infrastructure bank discussion belongs here, but I think it would be helpful to also have we are finance, and we will be talking about the structure of the infrastructure bank. I think our thinking here on transportation infrastructure is that those areas will be the beneficiaries of the infrastructure bank, and maybe in the letter from the chair we could differentiate as to witnesses that come before the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee versus the witnesses that come before our committee. It would be an opportunity to have that committee, which really will be the beneficiary of the infrastructure bank, have as witnesses what I would call their clients or their stakeholders. We could concentrate on the financial side of the infrastructure bank.
You've heard the argument. Is there anybody else on this issue, or do I hear any amendments? Okay, then I think there's general agreement with the 4 points outlined, Mr. Dussault, and I do have a few suggestions based on what Mr. Rajat did when he was chair of this committee, where they did something similar. I think there's a few other points, I guess I could put it that way, that we need to make in the letter that we would send to other committees. Mr. Dussault.
Well, that was my point. If the committee go in that path and send everything to other committees, I have a list of things that we can send to other committees. So I don't know if you want me to read it now.
Could, just before we go that far, could I read out the suggestions I have for the letter? In the letter, I think it would need to say the motion that was adopted, and this is a letter from myself as chair. The motion that was adopted also invites your committee, the committee we're sending this to, if it deems appropriate, to provide us with recommendations including any suggested amendments. We would have to put a date that we need them back because we can't wait. Another paragraph would be, therefore I invite you to send me the committee recommendations including any suggested amendments by letter in both official languages no later than a certain date, and I think the subcommittee could determine that on Monday. Furthermore, it would be greatly appreciated if you could advise me should your committee choose not to consider the matter, or if it considers the matter and decides not to suggest amendments. So do we have agreement that those aspects be put in the letter? Ron?
A slight variation. I think in your letter, the date by which they need to notify you if they're not going to proceed needs to be much sooner than the second date you were talking about, because if they're not going to proceed, we may want to proceed with a witness or two. So I would suggest you have 2 dates in there. One is, if you're not going to proceed, please let me know by X. And secondly, if you proceed, we need the amendments by X date.
Okay, then is Monday too late to consider this draft letter, or do we need to get it done this week?
Well, Chair?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to jam up other committees if we don't get it done.
Why don't we send it today?
Well, we need to get it drafted. Could we draft? We have the clerk draft such a letter, and I pass it by the subcommittee members tomorrow in the House, just without a formal meeting?
Yeah.
Yes.
Would that be okay?
Oui.
Okay, Pierre, on your points.
Just read the court.
Bells are ringing, so can we get agreement to keep going?
Can we get agreement to keep going? The bells are ringing. It's a 30-minute bell?
Yeah, we have
Agreed?
28 minutes left.
Pierre.
So at what point we can add the different division? that we
We're
want
open
send?
to your points of view.
I'll have a Part 4, Division 1. I would send that to the Trade Committee. And Division 4 of Part 4 to Government Operations. about Shared Services Canada. And Division 10 of Part 4 to Justice, the Judges Act.
Okay.
And,
okay, go ahead.
Division 11 to Human Resources and Employment and Social Development, or something like that. Okay. UMA Committee. And though the other are, was considered by my colleague.
Okay, that it?
I think so.
Then let's work through, if we could just get agreement on point by point or non-agreement. Division 1 of Part 4 deals with trade, special import measures, and it's talking about duties. To a certain extent. Is there agreement to insert that in as a proposal to the Trade Committee? You want to vote? You'd like?
There is not an agreement.
There's not agreement? Okay, let's vote on it. We'll have to vote on it. All those in favor of inserting Part 4, Division 1 and sending that section to the Trade Committee with the request. All those in favor? Opposed? Lost. Division 4, or Part 4, Division 4, which deals with shared services. Shared Services Canada. Any comments on that?
Would Monsieur Dussault,
Dussault, could you explain the logic for that? Shared Services Canada comes under the responsibility of operations, government operations, and these questions, based on my experience, this is the type of thing that they study. They're responsible for Shared Services Canada.
The Act, Pierre, it's a fairly minor change. All it's adding in is or perform any of the duties. It's mainly a wording change. In any event, all those, we'll have a vote on it. All those in favor? Opposed?
Okay. Sorry.
Lost.
No, sorry, Mr. Chair, I voted in favor.
You voted in favor? Okay, yeah. Carried. My mistake. That one is carried, so we'll send a letter there. Part 4, Division 10, Justice, which is the pay for the Chief Justice of Canada and others. That's what it's spelling out there. Any discussion? All those in favor of sending that pay schedule to the Justice Committee? All those in favor? Are you here, Ziad? Opposed? Lost. And Part 4, Division 11, Human Resources. Just have a look, see what's here, which is the special benefits, etc. and benefit periods. Any discussion, any point you want to make, Pierre? All at what? All those in favor? Opposed? Lost. Okay. So we'll add in Division 4, Part 4 to the letter. Okay, we're agreed on that. Pardon?
Sorry, we'd like to go through the 4 of Mr. that was originally proposed.
Yeah. Well, I thought we agreed in those.
No, sorry, we asked questions of clarification. Now we're going to, if we could vote on each one.
Oh, I thought we agreed on them. I think we agreed on them.
All
I
right,
believe we
that's
did.
fine. That's fine.
I'm pretty sure we agreed on them. I asked us their agreement. So we'll write those letters accordingly. Pierre, you had a motion you wanted to put? Just before, oh yeah, we got to go in camera for that. Does this motion have to come on the table today, Pierre?
Yes, I've
Okay.
put the notice
Let's
on
deal
the
with
March
it, and
20th.
then we've got to go in camera and get our act together for the liaison committee.
Ouais, merci de votre temps aujourd'hui, Monsieur le Président.
For your time today, Mr. Chair. This is a motion that I presented on March 22nd, and we talk about the stories that CBC Radio Canada heard from employees of Canada's big banks. They talked about deceptive and illegal business practices of Canada's banks. So this is why, further to the testimony, there's been a lot of public reaction with respect to the bank's behavior, and that's why I would invite the members of the committee to hear from the banks. That would be the TD Bank, the Royal Bank, the Bank of Montreal, the CIBC Bank, Scotiabank, and also the Canadian Bankers Association, as well as any other stakeholders that the committee deems relevant to invite. And we could discuss this at a subcommittee, and we could provide a relevant list. But I would like to ensure that the Bank Act is being respected and that consumers are protected. And we need to find out how we can avoid such situations from occurring by strengthening the legislation. So I invite you all to support this motion. I don't want a tight schedule. I'm open to your open to your suggestions. I don't intend to make sure that we study this at the very next meeting, but I want the messages meant to get out. I want the banks to realize that we're very interested in this issue, and I think we could do this study and invite banks and decide what type of amendments need to be made, and I hope that I'll have your support on this.
Motions to be lifted off the table. There's also another one quite similar to this. I believe it's from Mr. Fergus. So it's always a question of which motion you go with. This one's on the table. It's been lifted. It's been moved by Mr. Dussault. It's open for discussion. Mr. Leipert, I believe you wanted in, and then Mr. Fergus.
Mr. Chair, I have some issues with the rather inflammatory way it's written, which gives me difficulty in supporting the motion as it is presented. Is the mover of the motion open to wording change?
Yes.
So I would propose the wording change to be the following: that the committee, then we strike out everything starting with in to the next comma, banks, so it, and insert after study the comma as alleged in the media comma, remove aggressive and sometimes deceptive and illegal, so that the motion would read that the committee study the, as alleged in the media, business practices of Canada's banks, and then carry on. I can't accept the inflammatory wording because it is not proven that this actually occurred. It is alleged in the media, and that's where I have difficulty with it.
And the motion say as okay that motion is it doesn't change the intent. Are you okay with that?
Yes,
is it
I would support that amendment.
It's a friendly amendment, and you're asking at least 6 regular meetings.
Yes, at least.
At least. Okay, Mr. Fergus.
C'est certain, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, I don't agree with the motion for the reasons put forward by Mr. Leipard. It's inflammatory language. I think I had suggested another motion which deals with this issue, and it has the advantage that we would also be inviting the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, as well as other institutions that can ask questions about banking practices in order to protect consumers. And in addition, the other advantage of my motion is that it doesn't call for a minimum of 6 meetings. I say simply at least 3 meetings, because I think we can deal with this issue. And there's also, by inviting the agency to testify, well, you have to understand that the agency is currently studying this whole issue, and by getting them here, we can ask them what questions they're asking and determine whether or not they're doing a good job. And I think that might have an impact. So I think there's advantages with the second motion, but I'll leave it up to the committee to decide whether they agree with this one.
14 minutes left. Well, no, we only got about 13 or 12 at this because we got to get there. What are you doing? Are you opposing this motion in favor of another?
I'm opposing this motion in favor of another.
Okay. We agreed on the amendment. I think it's a friendly amendment. Takes the inflammatory language out. I think the motion, we're accepting it as a motion amended. Then, are we ready to vote on this motion? All those in favor of this motion? All opposed? Motion is lost. Yes.
I'd like to bring off raise the motion that I made of.
Okay, can I read it? Do you have it there?
I have it here.
Okay, read it, please.
That pursuant to Standing Order 108, the committee undertake a study of no more than 3 meetings to understand the practices of Schedule I banks on the sale of financial products and services to clients with special regard to 1. Sales practices and incentives for employees. 2. Opportunities for redress. 3. Codes of conduct. 4. Penalties for breaches of codes of conduct.
Better than
and
nothing.
That the committee also call upon the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada and the Office for the Superintendent of Financial Institutions to discuss their overview of the financial services industry with regard to the study above.
So it's been moved. It is in order. Is there any discussion on the motion? Mr. Ziad.
Yeah, well, this motion is lacking the naming some of the major banks, which would be beneficial to do so instead of keeping it vague like this. It would be nice if you would include the 6 banks at least.
Schedule I banks, would cover that.
Does it?
Yeah, Schedule I banks covers the major 6. Okay. Any further discussion? Mr. Duceau.
Just to be clear, Schedule I banks, your intention is to invite some of them?
Intention is to invite the Schedule I banks, yes, to invite some of them or all of them.
Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So ordered. Then just on the, we will have to move in, suspend for a minute and move in camera. Suspended. This will only take should only take a minute.